How are you all doing today, folks? My name's Luke. As always, I'm from Radford Creations, and in today's episode of How to Start Blacksmithing, we're going to be talking about scrap metal. So there's loads of different types of scrap metal out there, and you can find scrap metal quite easily. So I'm going to go through some of the places you can find it, what sort of stuff you want to look out for, and what that certain things are good for and what they're not good for, and things to look out for. So before we get into that, guys, I've got a bit of a plea for you. So I've lost my my word subscribe, and it's come as a real big hit to me, so I'm desperately trying to find it. So if you can have a look around, and if you see the word subscribe, it's in red, if you can just click it and send it back to me, I'd be forever grateful. So if you can do that for me, guys, thank you very much. So, okay, so as a blacksmith, as a metal worker of any description, you will be hoarding metal. It just comes so naturally to any form of metal worker. You'll be walking down the street and you'll go, "Oh, what's this? I'm having that." And you just chuck it in a box, and it might stay there for years, and eventually you'll go, "That's perfect for what I need." So you'll get very good at finding bits of metal and stuff lying about. People will give you stuff. People will be throwing stuff at you, thinking you're the new scrap man. But I've got some warnings for you on what to take and what not to take in a little bit. But first of all, what sort of metals are out there? What do we want? So as a blacksmith, primarily we were looking at steel or iron. I prefer to work with steel. Iron is very it's a bit more complex to work with. It has a tendency to overheat quite easily, and it can crumble and stuff like that. Steel is a very easy and stable material to work with. So the best way of identifying steel, because most things out there are steel, is it corroding? So this is just a piece of old rebar. You've seen me use this loads of times. You can see all the corrosion on it. That just tells me that it's just nice and simple steel rebar. I found loads of this. My boss dug up some concrete and it was all there. He was going to chuck it in the skip. I said, "Gaffer, let me have that," and he says, "Yes, please." Chucked it in the back of the van and I was away. Got tons of it. So what other types of scrap metal will we find out there? So primarily what we'll also find, other than steel, is aluminium or other types of alloy metals. So this is a piece of aluminium tubing. So how do we identify the difference between aluminium, which is not massively useful to us as blacksmiths, because welding aluminium is notoriously difficult and you have to have specialist welding equipment, and you can't weld aluminium to steel. At least I don't think you can. People in the comments who know better than me, please tell me otherwise. So how do we tell the difference? So this is a piece of steel tubing. It's a bit thicker than that is, but primarily they're exactly the same thing. So you can tell the difference. Look at the oxidization on that. That's just been sat out. It's been sat in exactly the same place. That's nice and shiny. That's what aluminium does. We're also looking at weight. Aluminium is far lighter than steel, which is what makes it good for most of its uses. But like I said, aluminium is not massively useful, and you probably don't need to have a lot of it lying about. I just have little bits like this. And another demonstration of steel versus aluminium. So this is a sheet of steel. It's just a 1 mil thick sheet of steel. Again, how do we know? Look at it all oxidising. You can feel how rough it is. It's been sat out in the workshop. But one way you can also tell if you're unsure, because for reasons I'll show you in a second, is by using a magnet. So this is just a simple magnet. Sticks to the steel. We all know magnets stick to steel. So a sheet of aluminium here, exactly the same, 1 mil thick. But yeah, magnets don't stick to aluminium. So if you're unsure what it is, the magnet will tell you if it's steel or not, because you have things like this. You might recognise this from our snowflake thing. So it's starting to corrode a little bit, but nowhere near as bad as that. You see the difference? So you're going, what is this? So there you go. Tells you exactly what it is. it's steel. The reason it's not corroding is because it's galvanised steel. So we spoke about galvanisation in how to remove galvanisation. This is a zinc coating. Zinc is an alloy that gets put over the top just to protect it from corrosion. So it is starting to get a bit complicated, I understand, but nice simple way of deciding what it is with a magnet stick to it. So that's it, guys. Sheet steel, you're not going to find lots of it lying about. You may find bits and bobs, but for the most part, sheet steel you're going to have to go out and buy, because it normally gets chucked or scrapped pretty quickly. Right guys, so what sort of stuff can we find while scouring the planet for our bits of metal and our next project? So we've already spoke about rebar. You've seen me make all sorts of stuff from rose stems, handles, the mounting for my Mandalorian helmet, everything I make out of this. I've got tons of it. If you go to a scrapyard asking for some old bits of rebar, I guarantee they've got absolutely tons of the stuff. You can get it in thicker variants as well. There's all sorts of different types of rebar. Obviously if you need something thicker, then you will get something thicker, don't you? We've looked at tubing, so all different types of tubing. So I've used this stuff. This is from a roll cage from a race car. It's just offcuts, and you'll get people, especially if you walk around in some industrial estates and stuff like that, you'll get people who have stacks of this stuff. They just let the scrap man come and collect it. So if you walk around and just ask them, just say, have you got any offcuts that you want, or he might charge you a tenner for a bit or whatever. But it's definitely cheap metal. So yeah, I use those. Like I've used this for table legs on my coffee table. Yeah, anything you want really. World is yours. So you've also got square tubing. All this I've found just lying around somewhere, wherever it may have come from. Horseshoes, fantastic thing. You can make endless amounts of stuff with horseshoes. Again, just be careful, if they're very old they can be made of iron, so don't overheat them. Car parts, I get hundreds of these, just old coil springs from cars. These are, once you manage to unfurl them, which is the hard part, they're just fantastic bits of round bar. Old tools, old broken tools. There's an old sledgehammer with a broken handle. My gaffer thought that's useless now, throw it away, chucked it in the skip. I dug it back out because I could use that for anything. What could we use that for? You could just repair it, put a new handle on it, you got yourself a nice sledgehammer, turn it into an axe, turn it into whatever you like. So also the one thing I'd like to pick up are these. So let's talk about spring steel. What did I say, spring like that then? So spring steel, as you can see, this is out of an old armchair, I think. So we bend it and it just goes straight back to it. So what use is that? Thing is, this is exactly the same piece of steel, but it's been bend it and it stays where it is. All I've done to this is heated it up in the forge. As soon as you heat up in the forge, it becomes malleable. This is tempered. We'll go through what tempering is in another video, but this has basically been heated and heat treated to a specific standard, which allows it to retain its shape, whatever you do to it. So yeah, I use this stuff. Obviously you can see how thin it is. I can bend it with my hands for the most part, which again can be quite useful, but heating it up in the forge with some pliers and stuff just becomes really easily malleable, and you can turn it into all sorts of things. Right folks, one more thing that someone might be very happy to get rid of into your workshop, or you might even find them lying about, are leaf springs. Now, as you can see, brand advertising there, this is off an old transit van. These are very good for making knives. This is hardenable steel, which again we're going to go through in another video when we're talking about knife making and stuff, but this is what's called high carbon steel, which is will harden to a very high standard, which is fantastic for making knives and swords and all things alike. Things you need to know about working with leaf springs though is this stuff has been work hardened over years and years and years. So this has been a suspension component. This flexes every time you go over a bump, and they become very, very difficult to work with. So you'll heat it up and it won't want to shift, especially by hand. So just bear that in mind, guys. It's not impossible by any means, but it's very, very difficult to move by hand with a hand hammer. So power hammers, fly presses, hydraulic presses, probably going to be better suited for working with this stuff, especially van springs and truck springs. They're very thick, very difficult to work with. Car springs are a little bit better. But yeah, with knife steel I normally suggest that you buy it, because also with this stuff you can have micro cracks inside it because it's been worked and flexed and flexed and flexed all the time. You can get little cracks inside, and you don't want to spend 50 hours making a knife or something to find out it breaks for the first time you use it because there was a micro crack in the steel. So again, if you obviously if you're dead set on using leaf springs and using scrap material to make your knives, then crack on. It's a fantastic material to make knives out of, but I'd normally suggest buying steel. It's actually quite cheap from certain sites. Right then, so what do we need to be avoiding? So you're going to have a lot of people just throwing metal at you. That sounded quite bad. They're not literally going to throw metal at you, but they're going to be collecting metal because they think they're helping, especially people who don't really understand what you do. And they're going to give you bags and buckets and crates full of stuff, and probably only 20% of it is actually useful to you, and then you end up just getting rid of their rubbish. So what you need to avoid, these things, tent poles, just useless. Like you could, you don't need heat to bend that with a hammer. Old tent pegs and stuff, just no, like it's not what we really need. It's that they're covered in paint and stuff, so by the time you've got the paint off, it's going to be so thin that you can, I always try and tell people that if you can bend it with your hands, then I'm not really interested in it, but people either don't listen or people have different strengths and so on and so forth. But just make sure you're being careful about what you're taking off people's hands. The amount of stuff people have tried to pass off onto me, it's unbelievable. Old kitchen utensils and stuff, like, no, don't really need it. I've even had like baking trays and stuff, like, no, it's just I don't need that stuff. I mean, if you decide you do need it or you could use it one day, then obviously all the power to you, but make sure you're not becoming the scrap man of your family or your friends, and that you're not filling your workshop up with stuff that you don't need. Right then folks, that's the end of the video. In conclusion, we want solid rusty stuff and we don't want shiny hollow stuff. You'll become an expert at finding the stuff that you need, I promise you. You'll just be walking around and you'll just find stuff. You'll always be looking at the floor, and you'll always be finding your next project. I like to find bits of metal and then decide what I'm doing with it, rather than trying to find bits of metal to do something, if that makes sense. You find your project in the piece of steel you find, rather than finding a piece of steel for your project. So yeah, these are all good things, guys. So if you're into upcycling and using scrap metal, I hope this video has helped. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. It helps me out massively. I know I joke about it at the start of the videos, but subscribing really does help me out, guys. So if you can, please subscribe to the channel. Next week we have another one-day build, and I'll see you next time, guys. Goodbye.